I've got to go.
Just on time.
Just on time. Good. Yeah. Traffic was nice. One good thing about people staying home, it makes traffic decent.
Right.
So is anyone suffering from COVID fatigue, smoke fatigue, fire fatigue, and politics fatigue by any chance?
Yep.
The fatigue syndrome. Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah, Mike, you raise I think maybe it's useful just to take a moment and to thank people for being here this evening. We were supposed to meet, was it last week? It was last
2 weeks
last
ago.
week? 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Yeah, see, time doesn't really mean anything anymore. And I just really want to thank you all for joining in this evening and continued service in the project. It's hard, I think, to care about things when there's so much going on, but your continued passion and commitment to this project, to parks, to libraries, to community services for your community is really pretty admirable. So just thank you all for being here, for being flexible with changing meeting times and coming on a different Thursday. But I'm really glad that it looks like folks are safe and well, and you're here with us this evening. It really is a pleasure.
I'm curious, how many of the people in this meeting had to either evacuate or were in level 2?
I had to evacuate work.
Yeah.
I evacuated to the coast.
I was in San Diego.
We were in one. We were freaking out. We weren't sure if we were going to have to leave or not. So we packed up the car and the trailer just in case we went to a 2, but never did.
It was a dramatic time, that's for sure. I live really close to the Clackamas County line, and I know I was telling Amber before folks came in that I was very appreciative of the county's social media presence and the consistent updates throughout that time. It was reassuring to know that county was paying attention, and luckily I think a lot of folks were okay, but also just really my heart goes out to the folks who did have to evacuate, who did lose their homes. It's been a trying time. So with that, I think we'll get started in our meeting. Doug, if you're, I'm looking for your face, there you are. If you're okay with that. We've got some folks watching and joining in today. This meeting's also being recorded, so if you're tuning in later, we're glad that you're watching. We've got I say this I think every time, but we've got an exciting meeting. This is a kind of a pivotal point for the project. So it's I'm glad to see so many task force members here. And you know the drill, let's keep ourselves on mute, cameras on as much as possible, just so we know that you're there. You can use the chat if you have a comment, if you want to chime in. When we get to discussion and voting and all that good stuff later in the meeting, I might call on some of you, but just let me know. You can wave into the camera also if you have something to say. And Shonda, since you're calling in on the line, you just go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to chime in, but we'll pause and make sure that we're hearing from you as well. Okay. So glad that you're here. So Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Allison. And I would echo what Allison said. Really appreciate you guys being here. It takes a little extra, hopefully not too much extra, but the commitment from each of you makes me proud to be a part of this group, and especially considering what we've accomplished in the months and the time since we've gotten this whole thing started to reach to where we are this evening. So. Of course, our main goal tonight is to vote on a preferred alternative that we can pass on to the commissioners and say, this is what our task force has come up with. Here's what we have agreed on after our time studying, learning, listening, analyzing all those things that we went through. And so that's, we've kind of, I think, the feeling has been we've kind of had an idea before we got to this point where we're at in the last couple meetings. So it feels pretty good already, but this is the big moment. So we're going to be hearing from Catherine and from Jennifer and her team and such, some more information that will help guide us and to any other clarifying any other questions and issues that might have come up. Hopefully you looked at your meeting minutes. There was a letter in there from Kim that I thought was very helpful, informative, and thought out about the park side of this project, which I, for one, felt like she echoed a lot what the feelings I was having, and maybe some of the rest of you as well. So it was really nice to hear. Thanks, Kim, for contributing that. And we'll be talking about that later. I think it fits nicely in with some of what I believe Jennifer was going to be getting into. Before we go too much further, I think we need to do a roll call to have for the record just who actually really is here. So I'll run by names as we've done before. And just call out that you're present. Ron Campbell. I haven't had a chance to look around the room even since I just sat down, so I haven't seen who did make it. But
yeah, Ron couldn't make it. He's
okay.
Camping.
Thanks, Catherine. How about Mark Elliott?
Here.
Thank you, Mark. Dennis?
Here.
Hickey? Yep, I saw you. Kim Parman?
Here.
I got my Hickeys and my Parmans mixed. Rose Ojeda?
Here.
Yep, I think I saw your picture. Anna Hosley?
It is no longer on the task force.
That's right.
Yeah,
I got it over.
Yeah, she had too many kid duties.
Yeah. Michael Schmier?
Here.
Christy Switzer? How about
Sorry,
Michael?
here.
Oh, thank you. Michael Newgard?
Here.
Grover Bornefeld?
Here.
All right. Jan Lindstrom? Thought I saw her name. Did I not? Oh, I see her.
Muted.
Muted?
Jan's here. She's muted, but she's here.
All right. Doug Jones, that's you. I'm here. Shonda Wild?
Here.
Paul Boundy?
Paul had a conflict as well.
Paul had mentioned he was not going to be able to be here, actually, now I'm remembering that. It's all coming together. Gary Bukowski?
Here.
Thanks. All right, everybody. We've got that covered. So yeah, like I said, we're going to be looking at our coming to a vote on our preferred alternative to forward to the BCC. We do have we need to look at or approve our meeting summary. So hopefully you guys all had a chance to look at that. And if at this point there's anybody who's got any comments, suggestions, changes, anything to be added to the meeting summary before we vote on that. This is for our meeting that we had back in August. All right, so for this one, just since there are no comments, just thumbs up if you agree we will approve those minutes as the summary as it's written. Okay.
Maybe just ask, I can't see Rose or Shonda. You both good with the summary?
I made a comment in the chat, just saying approved.
Yes, approved.
Awesome, thank you for that.
Great, thanks. Alrighty. So yes, meetings approved, minutes or the meeting summaries approved for August. And now at this point, I turn it over to Catherine for project updates.
Thanks, Doug. I just have a couple. We are still working on geotech work. All of the field work at the site has been done, but I don't have the reports yet. And I tried to get an update on when I was going to get those reports, but wasn't able to get it before this meeting. What they're looking for are a couple of things. One is they're doing some core drilling to find out the structural properties of the soils so OPSIS will know how to design the foundations. And then we're also trying to learn a little bit more about the Oakfield fault and where the stone is. And it appears that there is an Oakfield fault, just so you know. Gary he was out there with the engineers when they were out there. And they know that because the rock is at 2 different levels in a very short period of short space. So we're learning more about that, and I will definitely share the report when we get it in. And I've also promised that we will have an optional meeting for those that want to talk about that more when we get all the information in. Gary, do you want to mention anything?
Not particularly. I didn't try to take too much time from the project geologist, but he explained quite a bit of where the fault was inclined, and it's right to the other side of the parking lot in front of Concord. That's where they did their trenching. And you could see the soil that had moved into that area because of previous geologic activity. But he was very enthusiastic. And I found out he lives very close to another fault right over in Milwaukee. So he's used to it.
Thanks, Gary. The only other report I have is that we have applied for a pre-application with the county to learn more about the land use process. And that is going to happen on October 21st. And we will know, that will give us a lot more information about how we zone the property, how much parking is required, do we need right-of-way improvements and things like that, how much, stormwater regulations. It's pretty technical. And so we're excited to be able to do that before we wrap up this phase of work. And that is the end of my updates.
And it's my turn. Yeah.
I wondered actually real quick, I forgot to mention, I hope everybody got a chance to see the letter from Restore Oregon. I don't know if we had a spot to squeeze that in our agenda tonight, but I thought I'd at least bring it up. Thought that was really good to be able to get their seal of approval on this and to hear what they had to say. So hopefully you all got a chance to take a look at that too.
And I saw a hand from Mike. Did you have something you'd like to say?
Catherine, you mentioned a rock being on 2 levels. What do you mean?
The rock bed.
Oh, the base, basalt?
The base rock, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's how they know it's a fault, is because it's at different levels. And I think what Gary was also saying, there are areas where it's sloped.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions from folks? Okay, I know we've got more folks joining us, and I just want to recognize that Commissioner Savis is here this evening. So we're glad that you're here, Commissioner, and maybe we'll hear from you later in public comments. But I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer.
Great, thanks, Allison. I'm going to share my screen here. And I also want to recognize that we have both Ray and Jim here in the meeting tonight. So they may have something to add to what I'm saying, but we thought it would be helpful for you all to recap our survey work that we did with the task force and then with the public. And I think everyone is fully aware that the results came in very similar, but it's good to always see it graphically. So let me get on there. So when we were looking at the evaluation, obviously we were looking at, originally with the task force, we were looking at all the schemes, 1A, 1B, 2, 3, 4, and 5A and B. And I'm not going to go into those because I know we all remember those. I do want to acknowledge how much work you all went into doing this. This was took a long time, and I think shows that you all thought very carefully about the choices that we had and the different options that we had. So I put this into this graph because the information that JLA shared in the survey feedback is in a little bit different format, so we thought it would be helpful to kind of see it all in the same. So this shows a good spread of how you all felt about each of the options and judged against the criteria, the values that you all worked on. And no surprise, option 2 came closest to meeting all of the criteria that was asked to review against. And then when we took it out to the public, as you recall, we narrowed it down to 3 feasible options that we felt were worth considering. And that was 1B, 2, and 4. And I'm sorry, 3. And so as you can see, the public had those 3 to review, and we did not ask them all the same questions. Some of those we felt were more appropriate for later phases. So I think what this also shows is that we came in very, very similarly from the public with the evaluations that you all did, which is always a good thing to see, that that the public agrees with the thinking about how the project is best meeting the needs for the whole community. So obviously, number 2 was the highest priority of meeting the most criteria. And so I think that, as we talked through last time, will weigh heavily into your recommendation to move forward as we go on. So, you know, just a reminder, option 2, site. You know, I think this option really displayed for everyone the balanced need of activities for the site between the park, the library, and recreation needs. Just a quick recap on the layout. I know you guys have all this burned into your heads right now. Second floor. So when we get past this meeting, if all things are moving forward, we'll be getting into this refinement phase. And that phase is, you know, really starting about now and moving in through October and November. And Catherine will go over some dates on upcoming things. But what we're really going to be looking at in this next phase, we're not generating new drawings to have you evaluate again, but we are going to be refining our understanding now that we have a concept that we're going to focus on. So we're going to be looking more closely at our parking requirements. The meeting that Catherine is referring to with the pre-application meeting with the county is the meeting where we get to have a chance to talk about reducing parking, other options, understanding the right-of-way, understanding the requirements that the county is going to put on developing the property. We'll also get a better understanding of the park layout. Lango Hansen will get a chance to kind of really start looking at the grades in more detail now that we kind of know what direction we're interested in moving, and start to understand all those requirements a little better. We've also, we have had a chance to speak with the library and get some feedback on the layout and things we want to pay attention to. We're recording what kind of things that we'll be looking at when we start schematic design, and knowing the issues that we need to resolve and continue working on. Obviously, as we talked about before, we start with lots of big ideas, and then as we move along, we change them, we adjust them to fit just right, and that's the process we'll be moving ahead with. And similarly, we're doing the same with NCPRD. To understand how the recreation pieces are working, and what the feedback from staff is, making sure we have a good plan for when SD starts the schematic design phase, how we'll be, what we'll be really working on and spending time working through. The work that Catherine referred to with the geotech and our structural engineer, we're going to be taking a little deeper dive in that and making sure we have a good understanding and thinking about the ways that we're going to start addressing this building specifically with more information. Similarly, we'll have discussions with our historic consultant and be talking through those issues. I think as Catherine and Doug mentioned, knowing that Restore Oregon is supporting us moving ahead with option 2 is a big step, and that means a lot to the project. So we'll be talking about, you know, what are the nuances on the historic side that we want to make sure that we're paying attention to. I know earlier Mark mentioned some comments about working through building code issues and fire code issues and those kind of things. And, you know, as we get in and dive into this further, we'll be looking more closely at what those solutions need to be between new building and renovation of the existing building and how those things come together, and understanding from a code standpoint what the parameters will be for us on that. And then, you know, really diving into how the programming of the building works with the library, works with NCPRD, how when different hours are operating, how does one work successfully when one's closed and the other one's not, and kind of different scenarios, so we can make sure that there's a good understanding of how these different program pieces work together and how they share spaces with each other and what that means. And so at the same time we're doing that, we're pulling together our master plan report that is basically outlining everything we've been doing over the past year and summarizing it, collecting all the supplemental information that we'll be attaching for reference. And so we'll be putting a draft report together, and I think the next task force meeting will be able to issue something that we'll have you all review and give your comments on. And then from that, with your comments, we'll produce a final draft, which will be the report that will be with the recommendation to BCC at the end of this phase.
And just to clarify, Jennifer noted a couple of these, but the acronyms that you see, SD is schematic design, yep. MP is master plan, yep. And BCC is the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you, Allison.
There's a question in chat about that. So just so folks also watching know.
Yeah. Jim or Ray, do you want to add anything to that before I move on? I can't see you, so I don't know.
Very well described, Jennifer.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Okay. So I just wanted to come back to this diagram. We showed this to you all very early on when we first met you a year ago, last summer, I think. And this diagram is representative of our process. And this diagram really does describe our process we've been going through in this past year. As you all know, we started big, and we've been able to kind of narrow it down, understanding what's important, and now we're kind of at this end where we're refining and thinking about moving into the next phases. So I just wanted to kind of bring you all back into this to remind you that, you know, this will also be happening as we move into our next design phases, this type of process. And this you've also seen before, but this is really talking through, explaining each of the phases that we'll be coming into. And when we're doing construction documents, it's you know, these phases that we did review already with you all, but we're nearing the end of our master planning feasibility phase, and we're going to be jumping into schematic design, where we really start to dive into the pieces of all these things. And we'll address many of the comments and questions that you all have brought up in our past meetings.
Jennifer?
Yeah.
I just want, Gary's had his hand up.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing those.
Yeah, I know. And maybe everybody's really small right now. So.
I just wanted to ask a question about the last
Oops, sorry.
diagram you had up with where you started with brainstorming.
Yes.
What are the dollar signs imply at every stage there?
That implies that when we're talking through these things, we're thinking about the budget and we're thinking about the cost of the project. And so when we start early on, you know, we're trying to define this project as a team, not just the design team, but as a whole team. We're talking about project costs from a very large perspective. And as we understand more information, we gather more data, we understand the project better from the community standpoint, we're able to kind of narrow down that understanding of costs. So like in our last round where we looked at all the schemes, you know, we had cost information, you know, kind of rough order of magnitude costs with that, so that it was you were able to understand what those meant in that with that perspective. And that as we get closer and closer to understanding how this project comes together, it gives us more information on cost. So it's really just saying that we're keeping our eye on the cost, and as we know more, we're able to define the costs better. Does that answer your question?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions from folks? Not seeing any.
Most of this is not new to any of you. We've talked about this in other presentations, but we did want to just kind of be able to recap these processes for you.
I have a question.
All right.
So what I'm interested in, and I'm thrilled with where we are, I'm interested in being able to talk about some of the details around things like the exact dimensions of the library extension on Plan 2 in such a way that it allows for more of, I think it was 3 and 4 park. So how can we get more of the park from 3 and 4 into design number 2? Yeah. So particularly I look at the library extension and I look at that space to the east, and I'd like to find a way that we could go farther east and maybe a bit farther west and not so far north. So there's more room for the park to be contiguous, to be closer to being able to replicate what was in whatever those other plans were, 4 and 5. Where the park as a circular thing and so on and so forth. I don't know if that can happen. And then I look at things like, you know, Pioneer Courthouse Square has a stairway arrangement for people to sit on, but it also has, you know, put through it a ramp. So the ramp isn't a separate issue. The ramp is actually integrated into the stairs. And then I've had a number of people ask me about the exterior of the library section. We're not going to change the exterior of the Concord building, but the exterior of that. And also lastly, the thing about, and I get repeatedly asked by all my history friends about, so where is the history of the local area? Because this is going to be the Clackamas County Library, and it is evidently the place that Clackamas County history needs to be whatever it is, where you store it and use it and see it. So those are the things. How do those suggestions get built into your process so they're not coming in late and you go, God, I wish you knew this earlier? So that's my question.
Well, I might take that. This is Jim. These are all good questions, and they're a good preamble to moving into schematic design. We're definitely taking note of them. You know, I think there's lots of opportunity to build in the history of this project within both perhaps the interior and exterior. Something that we've had in mind as well, but you know, some of those opportunities will be identified in schematic design. It may not be fully developed until we're into even the subsequent phase of design development. You know, the footprint of the building, the exact configuration, yes, there's potential to tune that. We probably aren't going to move it further to the east. There's a setback related to Spalding that we need to respect. In fact, if anything, we may need to move the building further to the west. So it's not going to go further to the east in all likelihood, but you know, these are all things to verify. It could move further to the west. You know, in terms of feedback we've gotten from our historic architect, advisor and preservation on this, there's some merit to having the new facade set back from the original Concord facade. So we've taken that into account. That's not a hard set rule. It's just from his perspective, an appropriate and respectful thing to do. So that's negotiable. And where is that line? And, you know, how much of the library program and shared use happens within the existing Concord building may allow potential to pull back from the north. So I think we're sympathetic to the desire to, you know, create as much park space as possible. And the design of that staircase is very conceptual. There's the opportunity to integrate a ramp more into it, or lots of opportunities for placemaking that we look forward to developing in schematic design.
That's great.
I
Want to
also think- oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jennifer. Sorry, I'll wait.
No, I want you to finish your thought because.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, since we're checking with the county around things like parking, I
Yes.
wonder, since the Spalding Avenue right-of-way is also Clackamas County, so if we might ask them, where do they have some room to wiggle on that as well?
It's a good
because
point.
because it's you're going to be talking to them anyway.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and then secondarily, I just want to clarify, the part about the history that I was referring to specifically was not so much about the historic building, but about this being the library for Clackamas County and the historical. I mean, I have people who think that we should have a room within the library that is the
yes.
Clackamas County room, et cetera, that has archives and that kind of stuff. And it's been brought up several times before. If you remember, Lisa Bentley brought it up in a previous meeting. Yeah. So I get dinged on that, or pinged would be a better word, to keep that in the mix. And then I have another friend who is pretty upset about the idea that this is going to wipe out the commercial kitchen that is currently existing. And I'm not saying that's the solution, but I do know from quite a bit of research I've done, there's a huge need in communities to have a commercial kitchen available for community use, et cetera, and off hours use and all kinds of different things as far as supporting economics, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So I just want to keep that on the table as well. So that pretty much covers it. Other than that, you captured everything that I said. And
yeah, just real quick, there is a kitchen that's being proposed for the community room, and exactly its size and potential is to be determined, but it could certainly be sized to be a larger commercial kitchen. It's shown there in the upper northeast corner. We haven't gotten into a specific layout. If it's a commercial kitchen, and that can make a lot of sense, we can design for that. We can make that happen. It can be also planned for that. And, you know, if costs become an issue, you know, at least knowing the potential to be able to add the type of hoods and equipment in to make it a commercial kitchen. So that's fully, you can tell your friend that is certainly part of the planning. No limitations there. And we've had lots of discussions about having a room within the library that can certainly integrate historic materials and tell the story of this area. So those are all great thoughts and something that we are actually even at this point pretty aware of. But it's important to hear that this is from the community perspective, really important. So we'll make sure we consider that in the next design phase.
Thanks, Jim and Jennifer and Ray. I appreciate all the work you guys put into it. And I did hear somebody say that they would consider talking to the county about the ability to look at the right of way for Spalding, because when you look at the previous slide that you were just on, you see there's a massive amount of space that's sitting there.
I might just add, as Jim mentioned, there is space that we've identified as space for history. And it is a good example of how you might illustrate the shift from concept design to schematic design. So as we begin schematic design, we're going to be going through and refining all of those things, like the provisions for history. And we may dig in a little bit to whether there is archive storage of some kind, and whether the history corner of the library also has an enclosure of some sort. All of that kind of gets a revisit at the beginning of schematic design. So we'll keep documenting input like this, and then that will be the start of schematics, is really looking at where we have been and where we might need to tune things up for the future. So it'll be fun.
I do want to note in the chat that regarding the comment that Grover made about commercial kitchens, Rose chimed in and said that she agrees that would be a great thing. They'll probably always have food service cottage industries, and this type of lower cost commercial kitchen that can be used by the community would be great for economic development. And Kim also voiced her support for that idea. So commercial kitchen getting a lot of love in the chat from task force members.
I wanted to follow up with Kim's other comments that she sent in after our last meeting. And I think that I appreciate your comments, because I think it does represent a lot of the discussion that we've had about the need for a balanced need for serving many, many needs in the community. And I think we're all wanting this to be everything for all. And it is a balance, and we have to make choices. The desire to have play space, active play space, has to also balance with the desire of the community to be a place for nature, and a place for strolling, and a place for wildlife. And so there are many balances we have to come to in this, and as well as outdoor space balancing with the library and the indoor recreation needs. So we hear that, and we are going to continue to be working toward addressing as many needs as we can in that, and that this has to serve everyone, not just one group over another. So we do hear that the need for that is strong. So that I just want to assure everyone that as a design team, that's high on our priority list as we continue moving through the design process.
Thank you. I just want to chime in real fast. I appreciate that. And I would rather see a couple things done really well than everything done haphazardly. That's all.
Grover, I see your hand.
Say that.
I think Shonda. Sorry, Grover. Before we get to you, Shonda, I think, has been waiting with her hand up.
Go, Shonda, go.
I want to pass it over to Shonda.
Yes, I just wanted to double up on Kim's letter. That I think that was great, and I totally support that, partly because we have the Milwaukee fields nearby and school fields for big games and things. I think we need more individual parks with little walking trails. So that's my take on that.
Thank you, Shonda. Okay, Grover, over to you.
Well, I was in a meeting, our community planning organization had a meeting on Tuesday night, and we had people from the county talking about a bunch of things about transportation, and it came up about pervious surfaces. And I'd like to raise the question, is it possible? No, strike that. I'd like us to consider the parking being a pervious parking lot as opposed to an impervious parking lot. We already have enough runoff. This is on the side of a hill, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get the water in the ground as opposed to having to ship it off somewhere else. And I did go on a tour with one of the groundskeepers. The whole north side, strike that, the east side of the existing building, it's got huge water seepage coming from uphill already. And I'm sure you guys are aware of that, but I don't want to keep adding more water runoff. So I advocate strongly for having pervious parking.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Grover. And I know you were part of the tour where we went to see the Cascade Park Library. When that was built, that parking lot was the largest pervious parking lot in the Western United States with rain gardens. So we're certainly aware of and supportive of that idea. There are some maintenance and operational issues associated with it. So the good news is we're very familiar with it, and there's lots of opportunity there that we'll talk about in the next phase.
And then the last thing I want to speak to is, speaking of the parking lot, I see that nice little greenery all the way around it. Have we considered making a walking trail included around the perimeter of that as just another place to walk?
So we'll get into this design more, but that right now is our stormwater rain garden areas. So we do have to have on-site areas that gather and filter. Usually it's with native plantings, but that do go through filtering the runoff and from the parking lot, from the building, from the rain. So that's those areas around there at this point have been determined to meet that square footage need. So
great.
Yes, if we can do it and we have space as we lay it out, we'll look at that for sure. But just know that there's a lot of competing needs for the space we have on this site.
Right.
Yeah.
So I do have one more comment about that then. I've seen many parking lots designed where you see if you have the head-to-head parking, if you could do rain gardens between the head-to-heads, it's just another way to do it. I may eat up too much space, I don't know, but I'd like to consider that it doesn't have to be in one place, it could be others. And thank you for bringing that up, Jennifer.
Yeah, and we do know we do have to do that typically. So we would be planning to do in the lot as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Jennifer, did you have, I think we came to the end of your presentation.
Yeah, we are done. I'm going to stop sharing.
And Dennis, were you waving your hand?
It was not, but
okay. Sorry, I saw.
I was picking up my notes.
So transitioning into our next agenda item, I think folks are starting to get excited about schematic design. Rose also agreed with your comment, Grover, on the pervious parking idea. So that's also getting some support. But before we transition into schematic design, this group has a task in front of it to approve or to recommend a preferred alternative to officially be forwarded on to the Board of County Commissioners. And then from there, pending their approval, schematic design begins. So we're at the point in our meeting where I'm going to turn it over to your chairs to help us with the voting process in a second. But I just want to remind you of what you're voting on. So you're voting on right now between options 1, 2, and 3 that were taken out to the community. Between those 3 options, your preferred alternative as a group. So those details that you're talking about and that Jennifer outlined will come later in schematic design. And I think, Jennifer, I heard you talk about it, sort of the boxes, right? The big picture of where things are placed on the property, not necessarily so much their specific, sizes or uses, but the big picture. I think the big uses, library, community center, and park space. And as just a short reminder, it's been a while since we've done an official vote, but we aim for consensus in this group, and you know that your recommendations are strengthened by high levels of consensus. we've met some levels of consensus around this topic already. So I'm excited to see what happens shortly. But if you don't reach consensus, what will constitute a recommendation from this body is a 3/4 majority. So we have 12 voting members present from the task force by my count. And so that's 9 people that we're looking for. If we get fewer than 9, you can either vote again on another option, or if there isn't agreement on anything, we'll just take all of your comments and forward those to the Board of County Commissioners. So it won't be a clear recommendation, but instead general feedback. Again, we've talked about this before, but I just want to remind you of all the options as we get into voting. Since we're conducting this over Zoom, what I'll do when we get into it is call your names and then ask you to verbally state for the record how you're voting, if you're voting yes or no on the recommendation that somebody's putting forward. If you do have any comments that you'd like that have not been stated in previous meetings that you'd like to include with your vote, you're welcome to do so, and those can be captured for the record. This is being recorded, and Jessica is also taking notes, so thanks, Jessica. But that's sort of a rundown on how we'll do it. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug to kind of get us started. Any questions before we, I guess, jump in? Your faces are kind of relaying to me through the Zoom screen that you're maybe ready for this. So, Doug, I'm going to pass it over to you.
So I guess at this point, we've, I thought I was muted for a second. At this point, we've heard a fair bit. We've been studying a fair number of things. I'm sure most of you have quite a few thoughts on this. What we need at this point would be somebody to make a motion, to recommend one of which of the plans we want to put forward as a preferred alternative to the county commissioners. Anybody ready to do that? Kim, I see your hand up.
I'll do that. I'll move that we adopt option number 2.
All right. Thanks, Gary. Anybody else want to second that?
I'll second that.
All right. We've got a motion, an option selected and seconded. And so at this point, I think, as Allison was saying, we need to go around, and this is not a thumbs up, thumbs down for this one, this, just to be clear for the record. So Allison, I think you were going to go then through the list and take our votes.
Yep, so you're voting yes if you want to recommend option 2 to the Board of County Commissioners, or no, you don't want to recommend option 2 to the Board of County Commissioners. And I'm going to start us off with Mark Elliott, sitting in a green field. You are the first on my screen.
Yes, I agree.
Christy?
I agree.
Thank you, Christy. Mike?
Yes.
Okay. Gary?
Yes.
Dennis?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Jan?
Yes.
Grover?
Yes.
Rose?
Yes.
And Shonda?
Yes.
That is a consensus recommendation to forward option 2 to the Board of County Commissioners. That's huge! Congratulations, task force! Well done.
And I don't know if it matters for the record, but Paul, who couldn't be here when an email saying he couldn't be here, also said if it comes down to vote, he votes for option 2 as well.
So a ringing endorsement by the group. This is, I mean, we started this a long time ago, and we've been together through a lot. And I just want to congratulate the group on where you're at. And now the kind of the fun stuff starts, because it's all those, refinements and making sure that this is really going to reflect the needs and desires and hopes and dreams of your community. But Doug and Dennis, you've really been instrumental in this whole process as the chair and the vice chair. Do you have anything? I just want to pass over to you if you have anything you'd like to say.
Well, I just say congratulations to everyone. It has been, I guess, maybe strange would make sense, a strange kind of few months here, but in the end, we've got it done and we're doing good work. And then to celebrate, if anybody wants to do a drive-by, I'll leave a glass of wine on the sidewalk for you.
Yes,
Okay.
it's been quite a process. None of us at the beginning could have imagined that it would go the way it went, and yet we trudged through it. I was really anxious when we first started talking about meeting via Zoom, but I think our group has responded really well to that. Um, the discussions have been very constructive and thoughtful, and with lots of obvious good heart and good intention brought to the whole process. And I think that I'd like to think that that will feed the energy that the design team will then take going forward with this, because they can tell what our commitment is, how much this means to us as a project, and so it's not just a piece of work to do, but something that they know has significant impact for our community, and so that I'm sure will fuel a lot of their passion and energy going forward. So, but it has been exciting and a lot of fun. I don't know if Dennis or I would say that it was so much work, as might be thought, any more than any of the rest of you, just because of the excitement of working on this project and of making this happen. So thanks to all of you for getting us to this point.
And just a note, Rose said it very well, that we're on a roll with lots of exclamation points and exciting. So I think a lot of enthusiasm. Okay.
Can I say something?
Yes, of course.
I just wanted to add to what Doug said and Dennis, and tell you all how much we appreciate the hard work that you've all done. You stuck with it, and a lot of really detailed conversation that is so valuable to us as a design team. And we just appreciate the time you've put into it month after month. And we're just getting started. We're really excited about the next phases to come. So thank you. That's all.
All right, Catherine, you want to tell us what's
next? Have a big old party, isn't it?
Yeah, we're all heading to Dennis to get those glasses of wine from your front porch.
Grover, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I did. I'm in agreement with, I am thrilled with the results we produced, and I keep noticing loose ends that I want to make sure get caught or put into the system. There's been some discussion, and when we look at along the entrance along, what's that other street? The street that comes in from the north, and that property that actually belongs to whoever owns the Walmart area that is being underutilized, and just that whole general thing, I'd hope that we can stay on the conversation of seeing if, because I remember the conversation about maybe having parking underneath and stuff, because the importance of space. Space is expensive. When I moved in here, it cost $10,000 to buy a lot that's a quarter acre, and now it's $125,000. So the point is that land is not being used by anybody, and I was able in my own life here to buy pieces of property from my two neighbors that they'd never use in a million years, and it made all the difference for us. So I think it's important to stay on that. And I'd also like to look at how that entrance from that other street, whatever it's called. Olive, yes, thank you so much. Could be in some way utilized as a potential to put more parking or whatever, but if we don't get the space, we don't get the space, and now's the time to do it. And to plan it all and then get the space later, it becomes a bigger problem. So those are my two big things. Mike's got his hand up.
Mike, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just want to congratulate everybody. I'm thrilled, absolutely thrilled that we're going to save this building. And the history of it is unsurmountable for this community. It's been a center of activity for well over 100 years. And because of the work we're doing together, it's going to be the center of activity for another 100 years, hopefully. So I'm very pleased that some space for history is being considered for the library. I know that Grover, Lisa Bentley has been preaching about this from the get-go. And I've seen libraries that had, even a small library like the Dow's library has, at a very minimum, a little bit of history corner. I know that one way or another we'll be able to slip a history space into the library, and that pleases me very much because several of us at the Oak Lodge History Detectives have files and books and that sort of thing related to the local history that we intend on putting in the library. So I'm very excited that eventually we'll have some kind of space for that, whether it's a room or not, who knows, but the property and the building is very, very historic, and I'm very glad that we're going to be able to preserve it and provide it for the community for years to come.
Anyone else with any comments before we pass it over to Catherine? Yeah, you're ready for wine. Okay, over to Catherine then.
I too am thrilled, and this is really exciting, and you guys have a lot of tenacity and perseverance. You know, it's been almost 2 years that you've been meeting, and I really appreciate that you've had the ability to stick with it this whole time, and also during this extraordinary time, not all of it positive. So thank you. I just want to talk about two things. One is, what does the task force look like going forward? A lot of people are asking me that. And then also just sort of the near-term dates that I want to share with you. So in terms of the task force, we obviously need you as we move forward, and hope that you will continue to serve on the task force. We do know that it probably won't be as intense, you know, as all the time that you were meeting weekly, which was really amazing and helped get us to where we are today on schedule. So I mean, this could easily have gone off by 6 months or a year. So really appreciate that. We will meet with you quarterly, and at least, and it will change, you know, as Jennifer talked about the future phases, it will change a little bit as we go through them. Schematic design will be really an active time of working on refining the program elements and all the different things like Grover is talking about. We'll have a much better idea of a lot of those detailed topics. And so for example, if schematic design lasts 3 or 4 months, we may want to meet monthly during that time. And then during design development, we may not need to meet as often. It might be more quarterly, or even, you know, we don't want to waste anybody's time. We will certainly meet when we have changes or significant updates. We know that you're very interested in the history and the park and all of the parts and pieces of the building and the materials and the new construction and all of that. So what's great is I think we all know each other really well, and we'll know when we need to come back and check in with you if things are changing significantly. So that's that. Do you have any questions about that? I see Kim.
I know we've lost a couple of members of the task force. Will more be added, or are we sticking with the group as is?
I think we could certainly give it a try. It's kind of a tough time to recruit people, but yeah, we have 2 open positions. One was Anna Hosley, and then also Monica, I forget how to pronounce her last name, Rorschab, is that right? I think we will do a recruitment and see what we can do. Those would be NCPRD at-large positions. So that would really be nice as we're working on both the park and the community center. Good point. Any other questions? I thought I saw Grover. Did you have a hand up? No. Okay. So I'm going to show you what's coming up in the near term. I'm going to try to share my screen. Hold on. Let me get ready here. Okay. Can you see that? Should be, oops, should be nice and big.
Yeah, that looks good, Catherine.
Okay. So as you know, we're moving concurrently with the Gladstone Library Task Force. We got a little bit behind on that because of the smoke and the fires. They met on, I believe it was September 2nd. And they also had a unanimous vote for their preferred alternative. So that's exciting. And so here we are tonight, September 24th. You have made your preferred alternative known. So that's terrific. Now OPSIS can go away and start working on some of the details. They're going to be working on cost estimates. They're going to be sort of going back to all of their consultants. We'll be going to the pre-application, as I mentioned. So, and they'll be working on the final report. So the next meeting, this is tentative. We're working out some of the details, but will probably be about November 19th. And you will receive a draft report of the week prior. And that'll give you a good amount of time to read it. I will say what we're trying to do is make the report very readable in that we will have, let's call it an expanded executive summary and then a very large appendix. And a lot of the appendix documents you will have seen. That's kind of how we're trying to organize it so that it doesn't just get to be something that sits on somebody's shelf. That's very readable for everybody. And so at that time, you'll have some time to look at it, and then we'll take your recommendations, sort of similar to the ones that people have mentioned tonight about pervious paving and more detailed questions. And we will actually add those to the draft report. We won't be revising the report at that time. And so we'll take your recommendations, we'll fold them into the report as is, and then we'll take them to the BCC for a policy session, tentatively scheduled for the 24th. Also needs to be confirmed. And then you and staff will make that recommendation to the BCC to consider approval of that draft master plan report. So that's the November. And then in December, we want to share it with the public, and Dennis is going to serve everybody wine. He said he would drop it off at our doorstep, so we're looking forward to that. And we'll try to figure out some way to celebrate. We're just not sure what that looks like yet. Obviously, if we could meet in person and have a big party, we would do that. Barring that, we might, save maybe some of our energy and have a bigger party when we actually can be together. We'll just have to, if anybody has any ideas about that, send them on. We're really open to ideas. And then after that, the OPSIS team and staff will be working on an addendum to their contract and beginning schematic design. So we had a contract with OPSIS through the master planning. We're now coming into the end of that, and then the next contract will probably be for the balance of the work.
Catherine, there was a question that Mark Elliott brought up in the chat on whether there'll be subcommittees or kind of similar groups that might look at specific topics like interior concepts or artwork, public spaces. I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. If you have, if you have ideas, that would be great. It sort of depends on the interest of the group. For example, we do know that we'll need to do some mitigation for any changes that we make to the historic building, and I know that you'll be interested in that. Whether or not that's appropriate for a subcommittee, and then they would report back to you. I don't know. You know, it may be that everybody's equally involved and we can just do it as a group as we've done other things. But we can talk about that when we get started in schematic design. Do you have a thought about that, Mark? He's drinking his wine.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Catherine. You know, I'm just thinking of, I wish I was drinking some wine. You know, I'm asking the question just from my experience on public projects of this type, that as we get through the design process and get into, you know, past, you know, creating floor plans and so on, that OPSIS will be very good at doing. There's levels of input that the public or, you know, that others can have that are really helpful to the design team when you start to talk about interiors, for instance. Yeah, it's been my experience often that it's difficult to get consensus from 25, 30 people. So it's helpful to have a smaller team that might represent the folks to work with the design team more, just as for feedback and input. And I think the same thing occurs in things like when you discuss, when you start thinking about, well, we're going to have a historical presence here in the building of history, things that have happened in the building, things that have happened in the community. And all of a sudden you have people start showing up with things that they have in their basement or in their attic or in their storage room, and they want to give it to you. And they want to see where it's going to go in the building. And they want to know that it's going to have a place and it's going to have their name on it. And it's going to be this and it's going to be that. There's a lot of expectations from people when they start to give something to an organization like this. It can get very difficult to kind of deal with how that's going to be handled. And so I think it's something to think about, that there might be a group that can help with that process and give feedback and input to the design team, because I can tell you from previous experience of having to try to work in, say, like a collection of 300 Barbie dolls that came to the Children's Hospital in Chicago. Like, what in the heck do you do with that? But, you know, all of a sudden you have it. So those things kind of happen. And so it's kind of helpful to have some feedback. It doesn't put so much pressure on the design team to try to figure out what to do with this stuff. It helps to have others to kind of ferret that through. So I think there's other things like that. And you can think of lots of different areas where a small group might be able to help with those kinds of issues, those kinds of things that will come up between now and the day that we open this facility. So that's just some of my thoughts.
Yeah, those are good thoughts. Just so I'm clear, were you thinking that the subcommittees might be made up of people more than the people that are on the task force? Because of the numbers you mentioned, I
think that could be people from the task force, but I'm sure, like, for instance, Mike knows many people in his organization that could participate in that as well. So, I think it could be task force members as well as others from the community that have an interest or specialty in that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So, Catherine, we've got actually Candy Ho from NCPRD has her hand up, and I think she might want to chime in on this. So I'm going to let Candy, I'm going to allow you to talk. Candy, I think can you hear us? Can you speak? Hello, Candy, are you there? Can you unmute yourself? Maybe she doesn't have her hand up, and maybe that was an error. That's okay, Candy. But Gary Bukowski also has a question in the chat on when you think a special meeting to talk about the final report from the seismic study, when you think that might be happening, Catherine.
You know, I tell you what, I've been trying to find out. I think it would be nice to do it before the end of the year. So let me continue to get a hold of our engineers, and we'll set a date on that so that we can do that. I'm really excited to do that work. So I promise we will do it before the end of the year.
The reason I'm concerned as to when that would occur is there's some issues that might impact some of the decisions you were going to be making, particularly in regard to a permeable parking lot. Since the Oakville fault runs right through where the parking lot is, it's been established that you can lubricate a fault by pumping water into it. That was first done in Denver in the 60s when they discovered the Rocky Mountain National Arsenal was pumping the burn products of nerve gas into wells, and they started earthquakes in Denver they'd never had before. And they correlated quite clearly with the pumping volume of water. So it's issues like that you might want to look at before you make decisions like a permeable parking lot.
Yeah, well, we will definitely have that report before we start schematic design. Yeah.
I think I saw a hand from Mike Schmier.
Oh, I just wanted to tell Mark that I really am upset for him throwing ice water on my historic doll collection that I was going to donate to the library. Never mind.
Thank you for that.
Mike, we'll make room for it.
Any other questions from folks kind of regarding your immediate next steps? We'll see each other in November, it sounds like. On a date to be, you have that tentative date that you can put into your calendars of November 19th, but that will be confirmed by Catherine and company. Okay, Doug, are you okay if we, oh, Mark, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask one other question from the group, and that has to do with fundraising. I'm going to assume at some point between now and when this place opens that there's going to be a need for some money for something or another. And perhaps not all the money is going to come from the county. And so I'm curious to know if there's been thought about that and how this group might participate in that or how that might be approached. I'm going to suggest, for instance, if there is a community room or a historical room that has display cases and so on, and there's a need to raise money in order to pay for that. I'm curious to know if there's been thought to that and if that's something that would be dealt with by this group or someone else.
So one thing I know is, go ahead, Gary.
I was just going to point out, and Grover can pitch in and Jan can pitch in on this. The Friends of the Oak Lodge Library have been in the process of raising money, I believe, for some time. And they might be the perfect group to work through.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That's the only organized effort that has formed to date around fundraising and has been around for a long time are the Friends of the Oak Lodge Library group. So we'll definitely be working with them to figure out how they might want to participate in the project. Other than that, we don't have a fundraising development organization that we intend to create. I am intending to apply for as many grants as is humanly possible for things such as the park, for potentially seismic upgrades or anything like that. So keep your ears open if you ever hear anything about those kind of grants. We've been very successful with grants in the past. Jan?
So I'm curious, Catherine, if there's opportunities or abilities for folks if they want to donate an amount of money to the program or project, and if there is an intent to recognize them in some way or another?
Yeah, we'll need to think about that a little bit more. I mean, both the library and NCPRD has the ability to accept to accept donations, and that happens all of the time, and we have policies around that. If they want to donate to the building, we would certainly, you know, sort that out and see if it makes sense for the project. But we're really excited, Mark, that you're going to be the first donor of $500,000.
The Friends is definitely going to be launching a bigger fundraising campaign now that we know what we're raising funds for. Because before it was a little too amorphous to say, we're raising money for one of, you know, 6 designs. But yeah, there are a lot of people that are very interested in contributing, potentially having their name on a, well, I was promoting the idea of a fake card catalog, because I've seen this before, you know, with the wooden drawers. And on the little brass plaques, instead of A through F or whatever, it says Mike Schmier family, you know.
Yeah. We'll need to get our heads around that. We, you know, we look forward to everybody's participation, and we'll figure out a way to make it work and a way to coordinate it in a meaningful way with the project and with the task force. And I think we have a lot of similar goals, so we just need to figure out how to organize it.
So we're kind of winding towards the end of our meeting. Doug, are you okay if I open up for public comment at this time? Got a thumbs up. Okay, actually, since Commissioner Savas is here, Commissioner, you don't have to say anything, but I'm going to allow you to speak while other folks, if you would like to give public comment this evening, I'd ask that you press either *9 on your phone or you raise your hand in the participants window, and we'll get you there. But Commissioner, I'm just going to invite you in. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I sure can. Congratulations, everyone, on this step that you've taken today. It's kind of exciting, and I couldn't help but think about the history, recent history, about how we moved this, or how this project really came to be, in the sense that meeting at the firehouse with the Okla group, and even issues that or opportunities that preceded that, when we knew that or thought that we would never see a library built in the Oak Lodge area. So we've moved a long way, and this is one step farther. So bravo, congratulations, and looking forward to the next phase, the renderings, the drawings. You already have something right now, but I think to Jan's point, once you have something like that that people can grab onto, it's much easier to raise money on the private side. So I'll stop there and wish you all well.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, and thanks for joining us in this meeting and so many of the meetings that you've been a part of. So we appreciate it. Is there anybody else here who would like to give public comments? You can raise your hand or press *9 if you're calling in on your phone. Give a second to see if there's anybody else. And if you are watching later, or you just don't really fancy the idea of speaking on Zoom, you're always welcome to submit written public comments, and that can be circulated with the task force in their packets and noted in the meetings. Okay, I don't see any hands, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment, and it's back over to Doug.
All right, everybody. Congratulations. We got to this point. We're ready to pass this on to the commissioners. Tell them let's go forward and do many good things. So we will, you guys all take care in the meantime, and we'll look forward to seeing you in November.